Celestial greetings. I'm Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program on astrology called Looking Up. The episode today is called Get Ready for November, and we're taping this for the October show 2019. There may be a little overlap with some of the things that I discussed in the Autumn Outlook show. That was the September show, and if so, a little reinforcement doesn't hurt. That's what they do in teaching. You know, they tell you, tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them. That's like 3 times. And we're going to talk about things in threes today because November has one of those Mercury retrogrades coming up in it. And actually we start moving into the range that Mercury's going to backtrack through in October, and it takes into December before it comes out of that degree range. So there's a lot of reinforcement that comes with Mercury traveling that degree slice of the sky pie back and forth in the zigzag 3 times. And this is what happens with Mercury because it's so much closer to the sun than the Earth is that for every time we go around once, Mercury goes around 3 times. When it comes to that position between the Earth and the sun is when we have that optical illusion that looks like it's going backwards. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later in the show. And I want to start off by sort of I've been hanging out with my artist friends, thinking of painting a picture. You also put it in a frame, or you have a background, backdrop, foreground, as well as on stage. I need to hang out with some actor friends too, because on stage you kind of set the stage and then the actors come on and do the play. So when we think in terms of astrology, it's the slower moving planets that kind of set that stage or form the frame. And that's what we did discuss during the Autumn Outlook show about how we now have beaucoup de planets. No, right now 2 major planets in Capricorn, but more will be coming. And that is slow Pluto and Saturn, the planet in charge of Capricorn. And they're going to get closer together and early in the new year hook up. And then Jupiter is going to enter Capricorn by the end of the year, I think in December. And we'll talk more about that too when we look at our 2020 forecast. And it's going to go and join Saturn and Pluto. But if we think about this as sort of Pluto, like a slow drum beat in the background, and it says systems, governments, rules, regulations, and structures, all of the Capricorn turf is in kind of a turmoil and a time of change. And Pluto likes to kind of take out with the old to bring in the new. Sometimes there's destruction before there's reconstruction. So this can make it a little bit difficult for us to try to feel stable and that things are predictable. And yet here is Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, and it wants planning. It wants to know what's reality so it can deal with it and kind of figure out its limitations, its boundaries, and what foundation it needs to build a structure from there. So Saturn oftentimes acts also as the brakes, and it may say, oh, this change that Pluto's trying to usher in, we're trying to take our time with it, do it smartly. You know, there's a lot of things that need to change just in America, and I can't speak for everything else in the world, but we tend to drag our heels on it to a certain extent. So that's part of our frame or our stage setting. And then we also have Neptune working its way through Pisces. It's been there since 2011. It stays till 2025. And I did not mention, okay, Pluto has been in Capricorn since '08, staying there till 2024, and Saturn's much quicker. It just came in 2018 and stays to 2020. But We've talked some about Pisces. In fact, back around 2012, I did one of the first green screen shows here at West Hartford Community, called Television then. Now we're West Hartford Community Interactive. But I guess there had been maybe, I don't know, town council meetings that used green screen. And as far as the sort of primetime viewing shows, I believe mine was the first. And the first one I did was about Neptune coming into Pisces, because essentially they have the same associations. Neptune is the planet in charge of the sign Pisces, and together they're very much about things that affect our overall environment, especially the oceans and the water supply. You know, we've got, if chemicals get into the air, they come down as acid rain, then it gets into the water supply, goes back up into the air, cycles around, and in between, we're drinking water too, so stuff's getting into us. And we've seen what's been happening with things like in Flint and more recently in Newark, with some real problems in the public water supplies. And we're also becoming much more cognizant of how the oceans now are, you know, they've been our dumping ground for years. And finally some people are like doing projects where they take tons of plastic out of the ocean, and you can buy their bracelet now to help support their efforts and things like that. So when we say we've got this kind of like hard, structured, kind of cold-shouldered Capricorn energy that's so strong, and then there's this, you know, soft, fluid, malleable energy that comes with Neptune going through Pisces. How do we find a way for them to work together? And this is one of the interesting things that's been going on during 2019, because Saturn is traveling roughly 2 signs apart from Neptune: Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. So they're 2 signs apart, which is considered a sextile, it's called, 60 degrees. It's a favorable, harmonious link-up between planetary energies. But the energies of Saturn and Neptune are so very different. You know, one is about reality, Saturn, and Neptune is all about non-reality and how does it seem, or what's the dream, or what's the ideal, but not the real. It's the unreal planet. So we've had 2 out of the 3 connections of those sextiles this year. And let's see, the first was January 31st, and the second was 18th of June, and our third one is in November, which is why I'm bringing it up now, November 8th. And at its best, this combination would say, let's find imaginative ways to use Saturn's planning feature and not just be so matter of fact, maybe dream up some new solutions we haven't even thought of before. You know, we've got the vision and dream from Neptune and the manifestation from Saturn. So it can be making dreams come true. That's the big plus side to it. But there's always a negative side as well, or kind of a spectrum that it goes from, you know, best to worst case scenarios. But when we'd say Saturn wants to have everything kind of just so, and a place for everything, and everything in its place, but Neptune is all about like the whirlwind or the swirling spiral of, you know, water going down the drain. Think of fish in the sign of Pisces swimming around in circles, almost chasing their tails. So there can be an undermining of Saturn's desire for structure when Neptune comes into play. So somewhere in your life, you're probably seeing things that you're trying to manifest and having that extra either challenge from things kind of falling apart or dissolving, or maybe an extra boost from like, wow, this is working like magic. So magic does relate to Neptune and Pisces, and you do want to have to, or have the option to, use positive visualization to picture what your best possible outcomes can be, and kind of surround those with a big wish and a smile and a heart and a halo, and send them out to do their work. Now we also have and we've talked about this year earlier, I think maybe the May show, about Uranus has gone into Taurus. Well, Uranus is ruler of electricity and lightning, and we've got the sort of, think of alternating current and off on, and the waves, sine waves. And this is what Uranus is a lot related to, and that gives us the idea of a roller coaster too. And Taurus wants stability. It's a sign about money and values. So we're going to probably see some crazy stuff in the money supply, or in currency rates, things like that. Or when you talk about Uranus related to technology, related to computer things, the virtual sort of cyberspace, Bitcoin is now a form of currency, even though it doesn't really have a coin that you bit. Ha ha, just made that up. Anyway, this is a thing. So we're going to see also earth changes. And here would be a good one, making electricity, Uranus, from the heat in the earth, or more people using what are called heat pumps. That, you know, the temperature under the surface of the earth stays relatively even no matter what the fluctuation in the temperatures of the air are above the surface. So there's the ability to help use the earth's coolness to cool in the summer, or use the earth's heat to warm in the winter. So maybe earth is going to be a better source of energy for us, and the minerals in the earth and things like that are becoming very important. So Uranus spends 7 years each sign, and it just entered in 2018 to Taurus, so it's probably there till 2025. And the quickest of what we would call the more outer planets is Jupiter, that spends about 1 year per sign, and it's been in Sagittarius this year. We talked about that before, because Sagittarius and Pisces are at 90 degrees to each other, kind of cross purposes and difficulty. And I know we talked about the final Neptune-Jupiter square, it's called, that comes up 21st of September. So by the time you're seeing this show, it should be starting to fade into the rear view mirror. So when we see that we've got the stage sort of set with these planetary energies, now the quick planets come in and they play with that. And the key about this Mercury retrograde is that it is connecting to some of these slower planets. Now, when I said that I believe I said, it's retrograde entirely in the sign of Scorpio. So we find that the actual backing up part begins on 31st of October, Halloween Day. And that's at high into Scorpio. You know, there's 30 degrees to each sign. So this is at 27 and a half, or you could round to 28. When it goes back, it takes about 3 weeks, and it comes down to 11 and a half of Scorpio. And that will be November 20th when it finishes up. So we start looking from the time of when does it come in to that 11 and a half to 27 and a half degree range. Comes in on the low end, the 11 and a half, October 19th, I think it is. And it stays, once it's forward again, to get out of that range takes till December, I believe it's 8th, but you know, I did not write that down here, sorry. So, in the process of back and forth, if you find where that Scorpio sign is in your chart, and it may straddle across the dividing line between two of your houses, your departments of your chart, so it might affect both of those. If you have all of Scorpio in one house, or all of from 11 and a half to 27 and a half in one house, then that's the area of your life where you're going to have an intensification and spending more mental energy on the issues of that part of your life, or digging beneath the surface, because Scorpio, ruled by Pluto, the lord of the underworld, wants to dig into everything, do research. And all the re-words are appropriate when Mercury is retrograde. Review, rethink, rediscuss, revisit, reinforce. In the process of the back and forth, we're going to find that I think the nicest thing is Mercury is connecting to that Saturn-Neptune positive connection. It's going to be 2 signs away from Saturn, again that sextile 60 degrees, and 4 signs away from Neptune, called a trine, even considered more harmonious than the sextile. You know, the way we interpret these in astrology is we would say a trine kind of just brings you benefits, and a sextile, you have to put a little work into it. So if you put work into it, you get something out of it. And we have dates for this. Okay, so the first time Mercury is sextile to Saturn is October 14th to the 15th. Oh, it's doing both of these aspects. Okay. When it's in the backwards mode, because the exact 60 degrees between Saturn and Neptune is on the 8th of November, and Mercury hits their degrees on the same day, 13th of November. And then it finishes up, once it's done going backwards, the 28th of November, the 30th of November. So it's always within a couple of days, and sometimes even on just the same day, that it's activating that nice feature that's been hanging out sort of in the backdrop, brings it to front stage. And what we would say is, if there are things that you want to try to manifest from your vision, no matter really where this falls in your chart, you can use that Mercury energy at any one of these 3 dates, or 2 to 3 day ranges, and that's when you have the most push, the most oomph for it, or maybe that's when the best ideas come to you. And you might try doing something in a 3-stage process. So in other words, you can introduce a feature or start some kind of program or undertaking around the middle of October there with the first one, refine it, change it up a little, make your adjustments in that November 13th time frame, and then see if you don't get some of the benefits from your earlier work by that end time of November 28th to the 30th. Now 28th is Thanksgiving, so maybe you even want to do something that relates to Thanksgiving using this Mercury retrograde trio of time frames. Like if you said, okay, what would be a fun, game for us to play as a family, or a little play we could put on. This is what we used to do in my family growing up. All the grown-ups were getting all the food ready, and they wanted to keep the kids busy. So they had us prepare a play that we would put on after dinner. That worked out pretty well. So you might, start the first 2 processes with something for Thanksgiving, and then have the third one come into play for you. Now, some of the other connections that we're getting a 3-time reinforcement with are not quite as smooth and easy. So we do have Jupiter, as I said, coming through Sagittarius, and it's going to get together with Ceres. Ceres is a dwarf planet. It used to be called an asteroid. It got a promotion when we demoted Pluto, not we, the astronomers. And it's very much to do with, it's named for the goddess of harvest and fertility. So it's sort of a life-affirming energy and growth and support. Growth is also a feature of Jupiter. So we might say, wow, bumper crop of something. Jupiter magnifies as the biggest planet whatever it's in contact with. So Ceres says, what do we want to gather in? And Jupiter says, boy, we're going to do it in a big way. So you might find under this influence, which is in Sagittarius, a sign that's already into expansion, that there's more, I hate to say it, like greed, but some people are very hungry for more and more and more of something. Now, Sagittarius, it could be knowledge. If we're lucky, something positive might happen in international relations, because Jupiter and Sagittarius, the sign and planet that go together are associated with international everything, finance, relations, peace, war, all that. Mars isn't really playing into this too much, so I'm not so concerned about conflict. That's a good thing. Okay, so let's see. We will have Mercury connecting to both of these, right? When it gets down into, when it's in the lower or middle part of Sagittarius, it's 1.5 signs called semi-square, 45 degrees, to where Jupiter and Ceres will be. And that's going to come up around the time frame of November 18th, 14th to the 18th in there. And we might have, right, that's the middle one. Starts off October 2 to 5, finishes up November 25, December 3rd. By that point, Ceres is much faster than Jupiter. It's moving off from having teamed up. So since their team up is exact on the 25th of October, probably the closest of that Mercury, I do this because that's kind of what the symbol looks like, semi-square, looks like a greater than, no, less than sign. So that middle one, when it's in the backwards mode, November 19th to the 18th, that's when you'll feel this one the most. And it might seem like a time where what you're trying to grow and harvest is having communication difficulties. I mean, Mercury is the main planet of communication, and that's when it's retrograde, usually when we experience the most of, after a meeting, oh, I should have said such and such, or, forgetfulness. So write things down. Write things down and look at them a second time before you go to the meeting. It's also about missing pieces of information, or not being able to connect with people when you need to get what you're looking for from them. So some of our associations of Scorpio that you're going to find as issues during this intensification of Mercury, because it stays in this sign for so long, that's about going on 2 months that it's in the same little slice of the zodiac, and usually Mercury, called Quicksilver, whips right through a sign in 3 weeks. So issues include survival. It's big change sign. We want to transmute or transform. We look at motivations, underpinnings. There's a psychological component to Scorpio, so we're trying to figure people out. It's about our deep feelings. It's about private matters and about secrets. It's the sign of taking things out with the garbage, out with the old, in with the new, turn a page and start a new chapter. And if you're familiar at all with shamanism, which is sort of being an agent of transformation in people's lives, that relates to Scorpio too. So this might be a time when you'd like to study some of that. Now, when we're talking about get ready for November, we should also think in terms of the moon cycles that we'll be having during the month. And I know I've spoken with you before on looking up about what I call moon grooves. And this is how from fall of one year to spring of the next year, no matter what sign the new moon or full moon is in, the degree is in a groove, it's repeating. So we're going to have all the new moons at 4 to 5 degrees of whatever sign they're in, starting maybe late September, but really the October 27th new moon really gets on that 4, and it's 5 on the September 28th. And the full moons during this period are all about 19 to 20 degrees, whatever sign that they're occurring in. So what we're finding is that, 19, it's right next door to 20. Pluto is hanging out around that 20 degree. And this October, which you're going to watch this show maybe in October, the full moon then on the 13th has one of these things we call the T-square, with sun and moon opposite each other, and they're both at 90 degrees, maximum pressure and tension, with Pluto, which is a maximum pressure and tension planet to start with. And I think that might have been one of the ones I was looking at where I said, ooh, I didn't like the looks of what was going on around Southern California, and they haven't had an earthquake in a long time, so I'm hoping nothing like that is coming up for them. But when we talk about Pluto as the force for change, and this is leading up to Scorpio, but really, well, Mercury and Venus will already be in Scorpio. But I think that's going to be a very heavy, difficult full moon for people, because there's something kind of that you have to let go of. And because the sun's in Libra, then the sign of relationships, and the moon's in Aries, which is the opposite sign, and kind of the self-concerned sign, you might find a lot of people having, you know, pressure or maybe even breakups about whether they're cooperating or have to go off and do their own thing. Now, when we have the new moon, October 27th, that takes us into most of November, that's in early Scorpio 4, and it's right across from Uranus. So when we talk about Uranus being also a kind of a roller coaster energy, we want it to be stable because it's in Taurus, but the stability is kind of shaky. So that sets us up for a difficult month going into November. The full moon of that cycle will be 12th of November. It's at 19, almost 20 of Taurus. It's making a better connection with Pluto, but it's really making nice connection with the Saturn and Neptune. And in fact, at that full moon, as well as the new moon that comes up afterwards, Mercury and Neptune are in that nice 120 degrees trine, good for communication, imagination, artsy projects, entertainment things. The full moon in November does not look as difficult as the one in October, and our new moon near the end of the month on the 26th, for Sagittarius, yeah, we still have this tension that's going on with Uranus. Mars is then at 4 of Scorpio, where the October new moon had been. And that's not good. That's got some accident potential. It's antsy kind of energy. It's like, can't sit still, got to do something, maybe impulsive things. Risk-taking seems to be more appealing. So be a little cautious with that new moon. That takes us into December, and there's always something that we need to be careful with, something good that's going on, something difficult going on. So try to keep that balance in mind as you deal with November. And we'll talk about more interesting things when we come back soon on Looking Up.